Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations episode number 60. I'm your host, Joe Hannon. Episode number 60, which we will call New York State of Mind for very literal reasons. Just competed at the New York Open on Saturday, and this episode will sort of cover my experiences on the floor at the New York Open. I just recorded a episode of The Highest Levels with Emily Kwok for BJJ Mental Models, which is sort of more of a thematic exploration of what happened there and where I sort of fitted into the narrative arc of my development as a grappler and as a human. And as I say that, it sounds really fucking self-indulgent, but I promise you, we structured things in such a way where there are takeaways and hopefully structures that you can put in place for yourself and kind of capture some of that lightning in a bottle for yourself, hopefully. Ultimately, I think when you listen to that conversation, if you listen to that conversation, I hope the takeaway that you get is that this is my approach, and it is an approach that is effective in terms of improving my performance and improving my overall quality as a human being, hopefully. But ultimately, you need to find your own approach. And while you can use some of the same principles to find your own approach, the way you assemble them and the way you relate to them is entirely up to you. So hopefully that's what you get from that conversation. This conversation is going to focus more on the qualitative experience of being there and what lessons I drew, and I'm still drawing from that, quite frankly. There's this really awesome up-and-coming publication that a friend of mine, client of mine, approached me about contributing to. It's going to be called Power Trip Worldwide. I highly suggest that you find them on Instagram. Just some stunning, truly beautiful grappling-inspired fan art. Essentially, this publication is going to be a fanzine. And one of the guys who's behind this publication approached me about writing something for it on the subject of looking stupid. And I've certainly had and done my fair share of looking stupid in jiu-jitsu and in other arenas throughout my life. I can think back to numerous cringy years playing in my father's family band, essentially. I don't know if there's any footage of that out there, but God help me if there is. Various theatrical ambitions and projects that I took on. Certainly cringy stunts that I pulled in high school with my friends. And there's definitely a value to looking stupid. And reflecting on my competition history, this was sort of a high point in a positive sense of my trajectory of looking stupid. And I'm looking forward to putting that into language in written form at some point soon. But here I'm going to talk through it a little bit. So, as I've said in previous episodes of this podcast, I am sort of no stranger to the fear, anxiety, and trepidation that comes along with competition. And I'm starting to understand why a bit more as I go through this process of sorting through some childhood trauma, which I mentioned on one of the previous episodes. I have this outsized emotional response to stress, particularly like bodily stress like this, for very good reasons, owing to, things that happened to me in my childhood, which are now making sense to me. So I'm starting to understand that aspect of it a little bit better and give myself some grace to feel these things. And I was having multiple conversations with a dear friend of mine named Pat leading up to this competition. And Pat is just the ultimate badass. She's in her 70s. She still competes. She's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Has a storied career in horse showing, jumping, dressage, I think, stuff like that. And she was telling me about early in her competitive journey in the equine arena, how she would just be so nervous. She would have, GI distress, and eventually she learned how to reason with herself and to sort of convince herself to have fun, to flip the experience and to optimize it in such a way where the whole thing is constructed experientially for the purposes of having fun. And she was encouraging me to try this going into the New York Open. New York Open, which historically has been a very challenging competition for me, where I have looked stupid at purple belt and blue belt in the past, the subject of looking stupid. At blue belt, I think I mentioned in a previous episode, I had this match, round one, went out, hit a takedown on this guy, and immediately, I don't even know how, I wish I had footage of the match, I don't know how I lost side control. I managed to get 2 points, but somehow I lost side control, and the guy ended up taking my back and submitting me with a bow and arrow choke. I think he had me in a body lock for a while. I had no idea how to deal with the body lock or the body triangle. And I just remember Val Worthington was on the sidelines coaching me, and I was just completely overwhelmed and clueless as to what to do. And I tapped, the match was over, and I went to the ring coordinator and I said, "That's it." And he looked over his list and he was like, "That's it, man." And that was it. I left. Felt really dejected. And this was after doing decently at a couple local competitions. Purple belt, I had just gotten my purple belt. I had done 2 local competitions to run up to the New York Open, and I did really well. I just totally murked this guy who ended up getting his brown belt, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after that competition. And then I went to another competition and just, again, like totally murked some purple belt who had a bunch of stripes on his belt. And I thought I was hot shit. And I went out at the New York Open and went against one of Marcelo's purple belts, tried to do a fancy X-guard pull, ended up on the bottom of side control and spent the entirety of the 5-minute match on the bottom of this guy's side control, him just spamming me, racking up points, going from like knee on belly to side control. And I remember just being totally humiliated and saying to Emily after the match, like, "Oh, I let you down." And the message she gave me at the time was like, "Get it together, man. You didn't let me down. You went out and you fought like a 4-stripe purple belt, one of Marcelo's purple belts. Naturally, he's going to be really good." And I'll never forget, there was some glitch with Princeton BJJ's registration at the time. Like, technically, because we're a Marcelo Garcia affiliate school, we're also Alliance. And Marcelo, after the match was over, shouts to Emily across the match, like, "Emily, that wasn't supposed to happen. Like, our people weren't supposed to fight each other." So that made me feel really good too. Like, here's one of Marcelo's purple belts beating another one of his purple belts essentially so badly that he regrets it happening. Really stuck with me. So not a lot of good feelings about the New York Open, and Pat suggesting to me in a good-natured way, like, what if you tried to flip this and have fun? So one of the areas athletically that I've had a modicum of success in my lifetime is running. Like, I was a serviceable distance runner in high school, mostly 5K. I was okay in the 800 unless you put me against people who had actual speed, and then they would just wipe the floor with me. I actually became a better 800 runner after I stopped running in college because I got stronger. But yeah, running was kind of a thing that I was decent at, and I came back to running after college just as something to do to stay fit. And I ran a couple half marathons and did pretty well. Was thinking about doing a marathon, but it just kind of never materialized. But on the half marathon circuit, I had this very specific playlist that I would listen to during races, and it was all just like good-natured, lighthearted, silly music to put me in a good mood, to just keep going, to keep putting one foot in front of the other. So I dug up this playlist and I was listening to it on my drive to Long Island, where the New York Open took place this year. And it's great stuff, like Steve Miller Band, Prince. There's some Beastie Boys on there. I'm trying to think of some of the more ridiculous tracks I have on there. There's some Huey Lewis and the News. Just stuff that makes me smile. And I'm listening to this music and it's just not having its intended effect, especially because I'm driving through Staten Island, God's forgotten borough, and I'm driving through Long Island, through Queens, through the Bronx, just basically battling my way through traffic in this notoriously difficult stretch of roadways that you need to take to get to where you're going. And I think what people don't realize, unless you're from the Northeast, is that, Long Island is New York, but it's out there, and there's just no easy way to get there. It's almost like calling it the New York Open is a misnomer. You might as well be like driving to Massachusetts. So yeah, I'm listening to this music. It's just not having its intended effect. And I get to the event, fine. I park, get dressed, still listening to this music. It's not having its intended effect as I'm warming up. And I'm just finding myself in this shoving match with this desire to feel a certain way in order to have a better performance. And I just had this realization at some point as I'm warming up that this is just not working. It's not working. This is not who I am. I am not some person who can just play this Jedi mind trick on myself. I think I'm just too neurologically rooted in the moment to feel anything but whatever is present. And, when you're at an event like this, where there are a ton of competitors in the adult division, like I'm watching the Meow Brothers, for example, get ready as I'm getting ready. People whose careers in large part depend on the outcome in this environment. Young, hungry men and women who are really trying to position themselves as up and comers. There's a totally different energetic state in the room than, say, what you might experience at like a local competition or at Masters Worlds, where people are really just like doing it to have a good time. And you can't help but feel that if you're somebody like me. And this is just how I've always been. Some of it is a byproduct of this childhood trauma. Some of it is just, I think, how I'm wired. I see this in my son too. He's a very sensitive kid. Whatever energetically is in the air, he feels it, and I see it affect him similarly to the way it affects me. So I'm feeling all this deeply, and I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. This is not going to work. What I should do here is be true to myself, and that's just to sit with this feeling. I recall when I was a kid playing football, we would always do the most ridiculous drills to get ready for a game on game day. Like we would do the machine gun drill where you would be standing in front of two lines of your teammates doing high knees, and they one after another would come out and give you like a really hard shot in the shoulder, and you would change level and hit them essentially. And I hated shit like that. I didn't want to feel any physical sensations that were going to be on par or intense with what I was going to subject myself to for the next hour and a half or whatever. I don't recall how long games were back then. I just wanted to be quiet and still and think about what I had to do. And I knew that just doing that would be enough to prime my body to be ready. So that's what I did. I just sat down, felt whatever was going on, let it move through me, and just trusted that all the adrenaline that was going through my system would be more than enough to get everything limber when the time came to perform. So at some point, my coach Shane texts me and says, "Are you in the pen?" I'm like, "No, I'll head over there now." And that's what I did. I just sat there and really rooted into that moment. And one thing I've struggled with in the past, particularly in Miami, and I want to say also at Masters Worlds and also at a few local competitions, is that I've needlessly rushed. And I've done this out of nervousness. Like, I'll never forget when I was younger, I had this opportunity to do some training at the Parisi School of Speed and Strength. This was back in the day when they only had one location in Paramus, North Jersey, and they were really ahead of the curve in terms of athletic strength and conditioning, specifically for performance purposes. This was sort of a new thing back in the day. Most of the resources for strength training were just geared toward muscular hypertrophy, like looking like a bodybuilder. There wasn't a ton of true consumer facing athletic specific stuff available. And I was an undersized, slow kid for the positions that I played in football. I was really skinny, not particularly strong, and not particularly fast. And I was mostly playing, the offensive line and middle linebacker on defense. So my parents spent an arm and a leg for me to train at Parisi's. And they put me through this whole workup where they did, vertical leap, max speed. I'm pretty sure they might have even done like VO2 max on me, just like wild. And I remember being totally gassed, and they did a midpoint assessment and an endpoint assessment. And I'd been working with this coach, Rob Wolf, I believe his name was, who I think went on to go be the head of strength and conditioning at the Onnit Academy, if mine serves me correctly. I don't know where he is now, but he had been my coach throughout the whole process, and he saw that my midpoint assessment was much weaker than the performance that he had observed from me throughout the entire process of training with him. And I remember he drew this curve on just like a sheet of paper. It might have been like my program or something. And he said, this is the performance curve. On the far side of the curve over here where it levels off, you have intensity. And then on the near side of the curve, near point zero where it originates, you have like total relaxation. And the peak of the curve is this midpoint where intensity and relaxation meet. You become too intense, your performance suffers. You're too relaxed, your performance suffers. He put me on the far side of the curve, well past the midpoint, essentially being, overly intense. And he told me, I think that this is going to be an important thing for you to realize. You have no problem getting primed to perform. If anything, you're overdoing it. You need to figure out how to bring yourself down a bit. And I really didn't see this at all as a runner. I didn't really see this at all in football either, just because I think the positions I was playing weren't super technical. Running kind of, especially endurance running, at the time there really wasn't much thought from a coaching perspective about form or anything like that. It was literally just go out and get your miles in and destroy your body in the process. And in football, at that point, it was more about, especially on defense for me, it was about being able to anticipate what the offense was going to do and react early enough. And sort of that intellectual engagement got me out of my own way physically. But in jiu-jitsu, this problem of being like overly intense really started to surface for me, especially in performance situations. So I took that to heart going into this competition, reflecting on what I had done at prior competitions where, like, for example, in Miami, I was so determined to be first to the guard pull that I pulled guard at a really inopportune time and gave up a really bad position where the guy was able to just sit to an ankle lock and take advantage of that. And almost the same exact thing happened at brown belt when I was competing at a local, where like the same guy who had beaten me in the gi, because I put my foot on his hip and trying to like transition to a collar sleeve or De La Hiva, just quickly took advantage of that bad position and sat back to the ankle lock. And both of those situations, it was because I was overly intense and I lost the thread of the moment. I wasn't present to what was happening. So this is all like playing out in my brain as I'm getting ready to fight and as I'm feeling my physiology just get like overly ramped up. So I decide to kind of pull one of the levers that I have access to right now, which is this HRV resonance breathing that I've been working on. And for me, my particular resonance cadence is 4 seconds in, half-second pause, and then 6 seconds out. So I'm doing this in the bullpen, not necessarily to change states, but really just to be present to what's going on, to really feel the nervous energy that's coursing through my brain or through my body and my brain, to be more grounded in the room, and to just like feel my feet on the floor. So this is my warm-up essentially. It's not doing high knees, jumping jacks or whatever. Like occasionally I'm doing this just to keep the sweat I have going. But this is what I need, and it's something that like I've finally figured out. So I'm doing this as I get called out to the mat. I'm walking out to the mat, and my mind, for whatever reason, just starts repeating the phrase like, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Walk out onto the mat. The match starts. Immediately, this guy, I can feel, he does like a really weird double collar grip on me, and I can feel that he wants to pull me into some kind of guard. So I'm posting with my right hand kind of against his neck and trying to break his other hand that's grabbing my lapel and just circling, not giving him the opportunity to be square with me at any point. And eventually he lets go of that hand, and I'm able to now defend it. So he only has one grip, and I have a grip on his collar. I'm still circling, and I go with this hanger sweep single that I've been training since September, since I saw Josh just fuck people up with it at Masters. And it works. He's on his knees, I'm on his back. I collect the 4 points, and I almost nearly get the back mount too, because he goes belly down for some reason. And then he rolls into me, and I end up playing close guard for the duration of the match. I put 2 straight arm lock attempts on him, and eventually I get dinged twice for stalling. But the reason why I'm not being as active as I'd like to be is because I can't breathe. And I can't breathe because I've been sick for a week, essentially. The first time I had trained was the day before the competition, just to like make sure I still remembered how to do jiu-jitsu. And, I really can't breathe. I can't get air into my lungs as I'm fighting this guy. So I'm kind of just doing the minimum of what I need to do to win. And eventually the match ends, and I end up winning 4-0 with 2 advantages from the submission attempts. And like, I'm just dead. I have the classic frozen hands because my forearms are so tight from gripping. But I was there for the whole match. I was present to what was going on. I felt like muscularly, I had a lot of energy, but I just couldn't get oxygen into my lungs. So, come off the mat, I'm resetting, trying to resettle myself for the next match. I'm watching the 2 people fight, one of whom who I'm going to end up fighting, and I'm just realizing that my body is not up to the task for like what I need to do in the next match. I'm feeling really weak. I can't breathe. And again, like I feel this sort of, I don't want to say panic because it's a bit strong, but like this trepidation start to settle in of like, oh man, I'm really not feeling my best right now, and I got to go out and do this again. And I realize also like, oh, okay, well, like I just won silver essentially, because I had gotten a bye in the first match because I finally have ranking points as a black belt. So I'm realizing like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I've got a silver medal in my pocket already. And something Josh has said in the past just starts to increase in volume in my brain. And that's, if you give yourself an out, you're going to take it. And I'm present to this dynamic, and I'm saying to myself, like, this is yourself giving you an out. Do you want to take it? It's there for you. You can very easily take it. And ultimately I decide that no, I don't want to take that out. I'm here. I'm so close to winning a gold, something I've never done at any belt level, let alone black belt. And I'm going to go for it. I'm going to send it as much as I can send it, even though I can't breathe. So eventually we get waved out onto the mat, and same thing, I'm feeling all that nervous energy coursing through my body, but I'm just doing my resonance breathing. I'm trying to sit with it. And the match starts, and clearly this guy is tired. He had this war with the guy that he fought before he fought me, and he immediately just pulls me into close guard, and I didn't give him a chance to even settle in close guard at all. I just stood immediately and started to shake him and break. So I have this half guard pass that I use from breaking the close guard standing that I stole from Paul Schreiner. And it's really effective, and it's kind of slow, and it's more of like a pressure style pass. And at this point, after standing with him and shaking him off, I'm really having a hard time getting air into my lungs. And the guard breaks, and I'm in his half guard, and I'm like saying to myself, like, I need to pass this half guard ASAP because I don't have the fuel tank for a protracted battle here in half guard. I need to get out of here as quickly as possible so that way I can get to sort of a more dominant position, which I can hopefully stabilize or submit from. So I'm rushing to clear this half guard, and I clear his leg, or he just opens it because he sees or senses that I'm rushing. And my head's too low, and he just catches me like in a quick loop choke. And for a second there, I'm like, I can fight this. I can fight this. And then, the gray tunnel starts to form, and I immediately like start to go out. And I'm sure this is accelerated by the fact that there's just not much oxygen in my veins in general at the moment. So I tap, and that's it. And I remember saying to the guy, like, man, I wish I gave you a better fight than that. And I wish I gave myself a better fight than that. But it's very easy to sit here and talk through this now, a few days removed, and be hypercritical of my performance, just because the positive sensations have faded and I'm more in like a realistic frame of mind. But I think it's important to take stock for myself of what this means for me. And largely what it means to me is that I know how to do this now. I know how to psychologically prepare myself for competition. I know how to get myself into a more optimal state. The terrain is more familiar to me, and it's going to be easier to navigate it every single time I do it. And even kind of above and beyond that, I've proved to myself now that I belong in the black belt division, that I can win a match, that I can get on the podium, that I can fight well. My teammates, one of my teammates, Matt, who watched the tape, he said, that guy was in your game the entire time. He was talking about the first opponent, and the second opponent, he was in my game for 75, 80% of that match. I just made a technical error, and the technical stuff in my mind is so much easier to fix than the psychological stuff, because the psychological stuff, at least in my case, I'm bringing 37 years of life experience and baggage onto the competition mats. That's much harder to sort through. But the technical stuff, I already have a blueprint in place with Shane for some things that I want to work on. And beyond that, I already have some priorities for things that I want to work on. I really need to focus on, for example, finishing. I want to really up the ante on my submission game. So that way, when I'm in these dominant positions, I have sharper weapons that I can turn to close things out and move along. And thematically, like psychologically, I need to be driving things to conclusion better. There are many times in the gym where I'm playing more of an endurance game and I'm playing more of a points game, and that's good, but those stalling penalties are a real thing, and they will get you if you're not careful. So there's a lot to feel good about here, both in terms of what I accomplished and where I will be going based on what I accomplished. And I don't want to take that from myself. I don't want to take any of that from myself, because the fact of the matter is, this is hard. This is really hard, guys. And I would encourage you all to think about what you're actually taking on if you're going to compete, because there's certainly this virtue signaling side of it where, like, you just want to look hard, you want to look tough, so you go out and you do your local comps or you do your IBJJF comps and you post something on Instagram about, your glorious victory or winning or learning or whatever. And look, I think there's some utility to that. I think there's a tremendous amount of utility to going out and having the experience. But you got to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Is it just that? Is it just to tell the world something about you? Or is it really for you to figure out something about yourself? And that's what this journey in recent years has been about for me. I'm not going to say I've been wise about it the entire time. There was certainly in my blue belt days and some of my purple belt days where I was going out and doing it because I wanted some sort of value about myself to be expressed. But certainly at the black belt level, and certainly the small taste I had at the brown belt level, it's been about figuring out who I am, figuring out what I value, learning how to appreciate those things about myself, and learning how to grow. If you listen to the episode that Emily and I did for the highest levels, I get much more into those themes, but that's what I would encourage you to explore if you're thinking about competing. And, looking ahead, I might do the New Jersey Open. We'll see. That's in June. I might also give myself a break. Something I'm discovering as I work through some of this trauma and as I work with a really tremendous coach by the name of David Zeitler is that I am very good at pushing. I'm very good at hitting the gas and digging deeper and doing more. I'm not so good at recovering. And while I just had this success and I'm looking to build on it, and it's tempting to go out and in June and maybe put another win up on the board or maybe put some more points on the board, maybe the kindest thing to myself is to relax a bit and learn. It takes time and focus to refine things, and there's certainly a lot I need to refine. And also there's just a tremendous amount of joy in the process of refinement for me, where there isn't necessarily a ton of joy in the competitive process. So really sitting with that. I don't know what I'm going to do just yet, but I'm thinking about it. But I just wanted to thank you all for your support. I wanted to thank you all for your interest in this podcast. I wanted to thank you all for coming along on this journey with me. It's tremendous. I wouldn't have it any other way. And whether you guys realize it or not, the silent listeners out there, you are a major source of support for me, and I appreciate you deeply. That's all I've got for you this week. As always, bjjmeditations.com. That's where you can book in-person or online coaching sessions with me. I have a number of clients who are working with me now. BJJ frameworks training is what I've been calling it. And we've been using jiu-jitsu to train areas of performance, both on and off the mats. And I think some of them are making some pretty good breakthroughs. If that's something that interests you, you can contact me there through the website, or you can email me at bjjmeditations@gmail.com. You can also make donations there via Venmo to offset production costs of the podcast. Definitely check out the highest levels on BJJ Mental Models Premium. That's where Emily Kwok and I dissect the methods and frameworks we use in the peak performance consulting space and give you some insights as to how you might put those to work for yourself in jiu-jitsu. As always, please like, subscribe, review, and share wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast. And you can follow all things BJJ Meditations related on Instagram at BJJ_meditations. Finally, read me on Substack, johannon.substack.com. And of course, you can always come and train at Princeton Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Super stoked to have Josh Liu, who was on the podcast last week, coming through in a few weeks. I would love to meet more of you face-to-face and work with you. Come in, say hi. Just bring a clean gi and a nice attitude. Once again, thank you everybody for listening, and we will talk next week.